Tonight we'd like to share with you where we've been and also where we're going. I should say that Jane and I met as young interns. I don't think we need these.
I hope not.
We met as young interns in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right after graduation, and we worked in the firm of Earl Flansburgh and Associates. Now, Earl was a kind of graduate from Tech, then headed and founded, of course, by Gropius, and it was something of a East Coast Bauhaus right there in Cambridge. And his support of us and influence on us, I would say, was quite significant. Jane and I came from different parts of the country. You've just heard a little bit about this. Jane is from Arizona, from Tucson, Arizona, and I from New England, grew up in central Massachusetts, where contrasting landscapes, climates, and building traditions still shape our thinking. And I have this wonderful quote from Lawrence Durrell, "We are children of our landscape. It dictates behavior and even thought in the measure to which we're responsive to it." And we find daily that that's still the case. I attended the University of Pennsylvania for my architecture studies at the time when Louis Kahn was the head of that school, and Jane graduated from University of Arizona and was taught by faculty who studied with Kahn. So we did share that kind of root experience. At the time we began our careers, both in school and in the workplace, we were always one of two or maybe three women around us. That was the environment we came up in. We began our firm in 1982 with a commitment to design excellence in the public realm, and gradually that interest expanded to the urban setting and a larger context. From the first, we were deeply committed to creating compelling places for individual and social interaction. And from the first, we had a passion for the craft and technology of building. Our first opportunities were in the realm of infrastructure. At that time, hardly anybody wanted to deal with these questions. We did rebuilding of a small administration building under the Tobin Bridge, 100 feet off the ground in Boston, then graduated to a much more complex operations control center for the mass transit group in Boston. We did a number of courthouses and public civic buildings, both small and much larger ones. We did a number of community centers. These were all part of work of our first several years of practice, and also in higher education, a number of projects of infill embedded buildings here at Harvard Science Center, addition to the CERT Science Center building, and at Smith College, a small recreation center. So this was our beginning point, and brings us to what we're doing now and what we're looking forward to.
So today, our work lies at the intersection of architecture and urban design and infrastructure. Our projects are embedded in cities, campuses, and larger landscape. Looking forward, we're investigating the extended territories of architecture and would like to share those with you this evening. These are the areas of extending infrastructure, extending the public realm, extending sustainable landscapes, and extending global territories. Extending infrastructure. At the University of Pennsylvania, we were delighted to participate in a competition that the university undertook because they found themselves with a large piece of infrastructure right at the river's edge and at the end of the bridge that came from the airport, a kind of important gateway site to the University of Pennsylvania. One that was bound by roadways, river, bridges, an Amtrak line, a irregular kind of fish-shaped site bounded by those transportation infrastructure pieces on which they wanted to put a large chiller plant. Chilled water is essential when you have high technology buildings and hospitals and you need air conditioning and chilled water that is produced at a reasonable rate. So here is a view from the bridge from the airport, and in this particular case we took the simple infrastructure building, large industrial building, and wrapped it with an outer independent elliptical screen made of a new material that's now available for other architects to use, which is a perforated stainless steel. We illuminated a jogging track around the perimeter because it's embedded in a landscape for recreation. It's the other part of this project was the varsity baseball field in the same site. And continuing, in this case, does this have a, okay.
Top one.
So that site is here, the Schuylkill River, and up the river we worked with the university on some potential wind turbines in this area, and then later this area, which was a U.S. Postal Service parking area, was purchased by the university, and Michael van Valkenburg, our landscape architect for the Chiller building and baseball site, was identified as the landscape architect for this large 43-acre parcel as a public park and recreation facilities for the university. And we were his architect, so we worked both directions there. And we worked with Michael to develop the building and built elements of the women's softball and the tennis pavilion with a kind of raised teaching bar all along the river with this wonderful background. And again, we used a metal, small metal buildings, both for a services and for like a VIP lounge above the softball field. A third infrastructure project, building on those, we find that when a university has a large infrastructure project right at the either edge of the town gown border, as this does at Ohio State University. This is North High Street, the town on this side, the university on this side, and in this locus, a large regional chilling plant, where we were looking at the landscape, extending the landscape. There's a landscape buffer, which right now Larry Otlin is working on, and what we noticed was that the in addition to this large buffer along North High Street, that the landscape on the campus had irregular intrusions into the campus as opposed to creating a wall. And we did the same thing with the building to allow those landscape elements to continue to do that. And in this case, we made a very compact building with a glass building below and a screened a cooling tower enclosure above, 2 separate volumes, and a densely packed machine. These buildings have very few people that are using them, but they're in lively academic settings. So one of the challenges is how to make these interact with the landscape and be exciting in themselves. And so this shows some of that landscape connection through the roadways and in between the buildings, and then the chiller with its, which kind of glows at night at the lower level. Very important that it feels safe around these buildings, and then a gently kind of gleaming upper screen chiller cooling tower area. And we worked with Francis Cray on the lighting of this so that we didn't have to have spotlights on the building for the landscape, but rather a gentle glow from the glazed area below. And here in the daytime, this building is under construction. The chilled water is just about happening, and the building is enclosed. And so here we see a translucent frit on this glass, very sheer curtain wall, and then a pattern of two different densities of screen that will go all the way around the chiller cooling towers. And here, another view with a little more of the cooling towers enclosed.
So we really began by doing a lot of infrastructure projects and have really embraced the nature of the terrific nature and public aspect that they offer. They are way too big to go away, and why not celebrate them? They're part of our urban and campus landscape. So that is one way that we've really imagined extending the necessary into the urban fabric. Another kind of extension is extending the public realm. The public realm is more than the front door of this building. The public realm already for this building extends to the beautiful Judiciary Park across the way. And similarly, when we did a series of courthouses, the Orlando Federal Courthouse, we were thinking very much about its role in the entire city. The north-south I-4, I think it is I-4 if I'm not mistaken, divides the city into the kind of downtown and beautiful lake areas and the part of town, the other side of the tracks part of town. Of course, that's where all the government installations are, and that's where the site for the courthouse is. So how to connect across this formidable barrier and connect the courthouse on one of the main streets of the city when the main intersection is right here. We imagined the courthouse, which is in fact a large new building on a whole city block adjacent to a 1970s federal building, together with a new parking garage, as a way to embrace a new public park. And that public park would be open to the larger neighborhood. A law school is up here, and gathering that all together. We arranged the parts of the courthouse so that the public space faced the main central boulevard. The entry was marked clearly along that boulevard from both directions down on the ground. And here you can see clearly the importance of that park and being Orlando, a very lush and green landscape, so that the chambers, what we're looking at here are the chambers, the courtrooms are on the other side, the federal building here, and the downtown in the distance. So it really is much more than the building itself, but extended into the whole public realm. Inside the public lobby, just inside that wall we were looking at, a beautiful dappled light. And so that's a very large scale extension of the public realm.
And I'm going to go back just because we had the great honor to work with Dan Kiley on this landscape. And since I was talking about landscape, I'm going to intrude here and talk about this wonderful depressed garden that included existing trees and creates even though it goes down just a few steps, creates a sense of separation, privacy, and tranquility. And of course, we have a wonderful exhibit here in the National Building Museum of Dan Kiley's work.
I think that was Dan's last major project. In fact, we traveled up to Vermont to work with him. It was a great honor. But extending the public realm in Boston, we had the opportunity to work with the Mass General Hospital on an important site at the juncture between the hospital, which is a very inward-looking group of Goliath buildings, and the very small texture of old historic Beacon Hill in this area, and Charles Street in between, the major bridge across. So here we see, looking from the same direction, we're up on Beacon Hill looking down, and here is a small site in front of a parking garage and all of these huge hospital buildings in which the public is invited to experience the hospital as a preview to what is going on there. It's kind of in a very good, welcoming location. It is open on the ground floor. It's screened above in a kind of mysterious way in copper. And then there's an upper pergola, which kind of pumps up the building because it was a very small, privately funded museum that encloses a wonderful rooftop garden. So many contributions to the public realm in this case. Primary for the neighborhood is the activation of the sidewalk rather than having the feature of the featureless parking garage as the neighborhood component. Very narrow site. This is about 20 feet on one side, and it moves up to a generous 36 feet on the other. And so you can see why this little building had a big job. Inside, the transparency and permeability makes the exhibits visible to people going passing by on the street, and provides a light and airy experience and continuation of the Charles Street liveliness. Upstairs, a little more refinement, an enclosure where public lectures are offered by the museum just about every week, either at lunchtime or in the evening. Here we used a fritted copper-like glass, and you can see the clear glass as well. And here's the roof garden looking out towards the Massachusetts State House. Wonderful place for families who have people that they're visiting in the hospital to take some time out. And then in the evening. So animating the larger urban scene. But we're also looking at sustainable landscapes and extending the idea of building sustainability and landscape sustainability. And at the University of Connecticut, we have two projects together at the center of the campus that one is here with a green roof, an existing kind of Campidoglio plaza, and a new landscape that traverses both of those areas in a large academic and departmental building. So two buildings, both of them for students and general purpose classrooms, and 5 humanities and social studies departments up above. So here you can see the weave of the landscape, which moves underneath a bridge here, which takes a major pedestrian way and moves it that direction,
to stay out of a service area. It moves a service dock more separated from this path by moving the path away. So kind of making a safer environment while making a sustainable landscape and memorable landscape spaces. So here is Laurel Hall, which is all classrooms, large lecture halls in this area, smaller classrooms here, and it also frames a major campus quad in connection with the student union behind, and extends a sustainable landscape, particularly with respect to water flow. Inside is a movement path from that major campus pathway to the student union beyond. And here you can see some of the landscape treatment, which is quite different than many campuses here. This is an agrarian campus, and this goes back to some of those agrarian roots. And we can see here a entry landscape and part of the courtyard landscapes beyond. And then outside all of the classrooms are areas to wait and participate in the landscape beyond, a north and a south courtyard. So this describes Oak Hall, which is this kind of zigzag serpentine shape with two connected courtyards, a landscape buffer that keeps students safely heading this way and this way, as opposed to streaming through the loading dock and continuing down these loading docks. And then a new landscape surrounding Laurel Hall as well, with a green roof, which is quite visible from down the hill. And here is a bioswale, which takes the, let's see if we have a diagram of that. Yes, here. It takes the rainwater and from the roof leaders and takes it into an area where it can recharge the water table for the stormwater runoff. And then this is some of the sustainable landscape, which was quite new on the campus. This is very different, and we worked with the maintenance group, because this is something where you once a year go in and mow and clean out the paper cups, as opposed to mowing. And in the evening, and under the a bridge of Oak Hall, the area connecting the two courtyards.
Well, we've been fortunate to work, as Jane has just talked about, on a campus where the creation of two buildings and the landscape that joins them and knits together a whole part of the crossroads of the campus was the challenge. Here at the University of North Carolina, that challenge is going to the next step. The university is has designated a small private airport just about 1.5 miles, 2 miles north of the Chapel Hill campus center. They're going to develop a new campus which will be for collaborative science research, companies, enterprises, a real coming together of academic and business interests around the sciences. The name Chapel Hill suggests that the landscape is not flat, but in fact what happened to create a small airfield is a major land intervention, and one of the really interesting challenges is the healing of this scar of the natural landscape in making a campus. This is a very interesting subject all around the world. Not long ago there was a conference at Harvard about repurposing airports and all of the systems, the natural systems that they've destroyed in their making. And that was a very much a part of what was going on here. Air St. Gross developed a campus master plan whose main space followed the line of the runway, and a series of roads that traverse that space. And right at the very corner of the entry loop road and the Greenway, they designated a site for their first building, a building of collaborative research in the health sciences, in the environmental sciences. And it was our task to imagine the first building of this campus. We knew that we were a kind of cornerstone, north-facing on the Greenway, south-facing on a more open space. We explored a number of different configurations which reflected a zone of more public activity, conferences, meeting space on the north Greenway side, and then on the south side, a series of spaces which would be workspaces, both open and closed, and then joined together at the center. The landscape was very much part of our thinking here. We worked with Michael van Valkenburg to develop the entire quadrant where this building would be along the Greenway, with the goal to provide stormwater management on the site, not let any water flow, no piped water, no underground systems. All of the water, therefore, is collected in what will be a permanent garden. The surface parking is temporary, will be eventually superseded by building here and all across here. But this permanent landscape, which is the water management place, will stay. And you can begin to see how we were able to think of the building and its garden and the question of managing stormwater in this area. Big deluge rains, as maybe you have here in Washington sometimes. Now, the building itself is divided into the Greenway side, which are the conference rooms, and the southern part of the building, which are inner closed offices, private offices, and outer open workstations, a sea change for academic thinking, beginning to be quite widely accepted in commercial spaces, but really very new for academic space. The two areas are joined by a very active vertical atrium space with the conference zones here, the work zones here. Some of those conference spaces poke out into the middle area, top lit, so that the idea of collaboration, nobody gets the conference room in their space. You cross a public zone and get that together. Oops, sorry about that. Let me go back. So the side of the Greenway, which is for the conference and meeting spaces, is very open and glazed, and the side to the south garden is shaded, working closely with Atelier 10 to develop the maximum good daylight and views and the best protection from sun. So we'll just quickly walk in the front door. We're going in the atrium space, public gathering to the left, a main space through the center. Rising up, it's a 7-story building, very significant size of building, big building. And what we're looking at on the right are the workspaces. The idea here really was to create a sustainable community of people, of researchers. There are 900 to 1,000 researchers who will be in this building. So it really is a village, you know. It's a lot of people. Moving back and looking across, this is an earlier study model, moving up through the space. Always looking out to the landscape. Now you can see down the Greenway there at the end. An extraordinary space, and incredible to leave it open that way. And then bridging across from the work side to the meeting side. So these are open workstations, some closed offices at the cores, and then through passages as we go.
And before we leave the extending the sustainable landscapes, I should mention that on the Yukon project, we worked with Stephen Simpson for that beautiful sustainable landscape.
So our final topic is moving across the pond, is really going global, because this too extends our understanding of what kinds of environments require different kind of response, culturally, climatically. We have been fortunate to be involved in two large design build competitions for universities on the outskirts of Paris. One is completed, one is underway, and I'll share the one that was completed with you. Here's the center of Paris. You might recognize its peripheral highway, boulevard, which is actually also the delimitation of the political entity of Paris. Just to the north, a new campus is being constructed in an old industrial area. That's one we're working on. And to the south, the plateau called the Saclay Plateau, which is the locus of a lot of science and technology installations already, research, aerotech, and will be a future site of a great deal of development. The business school called HEC is there. HEC was built in the 60s and was built on the edge of the plateau, which is very flat and agricultural. The sides are wooded and protected. It was built because the school outgrew its downtown location in Paris, and it was built all at once, all of these bar building dormitories on one side and a kind of grand courtyard, almost like a chateau of classrooms on the other. The notion was to expand in this area future campus sites. We did a number of studies for the campus as a whole, the dormitories, the classrooms, and then the newly developed areas. So a kind of three-part campus. And gradually and eventually we came to the notion that at the nexus of the three parts there might be a small campus center. They quickly called it a totem. To us that was a strange name because it was hardly tall enough to be a totem, but that was a designation that seemed right. It's a twisted crystalline form with 4 levels of cafe on the bottom and student services and a big multi-purpose room on the top. And you can see some of those views. And there it is at the entrance to the campus, dormitories, classroom building, and classroom in the distance. And here is that totem, and there it is right at the corner, midwinter slide. So we really began to engage the question of what it means to extend our thinking. We've done a lot of campus work, but what it means to extend that to a new culture and a new landscape. And even farther afield, more recently, we did a campus study and building siting for the MIT of Taiwan, called the National Chiao University, in the city of Hsinchu, about 45 minutes from Taipei. This was a campus that was established in the 50s when Chiang Kai-shek brought people out of mainland China, set up this university, and this small campus was their foothold. Very quickly they outgrew it, bought another parcel elsewhere, built a much bigger campus, and then found themselves trying to figure out what to do with this campus. Very interesting, very low scale, very, very tropical climate here. Has a gate right now on its north edge, and then the city kind of joins at the south, and that is the sense. There's a center green space with big, big banyan trees lining it, kind of an extraordinary tropical landscape, and very low-scale buildings all around the periphery. But it had been more or less abandoned for many years, and a wonderful land trust to build on. So one of the very first things we did was to look at the notion of creating a new gate on the city side, the more dense city side over here. The original gate is over here. Connecting the two gates by continuing that alley of big trees, by separating the lower scale, they called it village scale, of older buildings from some of the newer buildings, the biotech buildings that they envisioned, so that in the short term they would perhaps build some markers here at this end of the campus, a big biotech building here and perhaps a clinic. And the longer range was really to rebuild everything that isn't gray here. The yellow would be dormitories, and the red mostly academic buildings. And to really develop it as a biotech campus, stimulated by this first new building, which we did design right here at the turning of the new road. So we can just see a little bit of how this sits here. Here you can see the density of the city over on this side and the relative lowness over here. Here's the original north gate coming right in on this side. There's the big banyan trees coming through the gate. This is their original administration building, and we are proposing a new clock tower, and then moving down the existing boulevard, the tower of the biotech in the distance, the new biotech building. The landscape is actually the best asset of the new, of the campus, and there's the entry. Now, the new gate, the new west gate that we propose from the city side would come in here. We would plant new trees and find the biotech building on our right coming in.
We're always a pedestrian.
Yes. And then finally, inside, there's a low portion of the biotech building and a higher portion. The low portion flying through here. The low portion has the wet labs, and the higher portion has the dry lab. So this is the center of the low portion, which is really a commons, offices and labs all around. Moving down to the end where there is a big cafeteria overlooking the lawn. And then straight ahead is the tower with the dry labs, mostly computation labs, and connected through this common space where offices are on the right side and laboratories are on the left side. So this was really about a space that could bring people together and be the heart and the inspiration of the revitalization of the whole campus. So I think we're just about done. Just say a few concluding remarks. When we began, our work was centered on the design of more or less self-contained buildings, and mostly right in our native Boston. And this is how we learned our craft. Since that time, the urgency of increased urbanization, the revolution in digital technology, and the awareness that we are overusing our one planet's resources have dramatically altered the nature of practice and have inspired us to burst those boundaries. So this is an invigorating time for us. We are pushing the boundaries of territories we have explored since the inception of our practice, such as infrastructure. We're extending our explorations of the continuity of building, urban context, and landscape, and we are broadening our horizons far beyond our immediate community. And we still care deeply about the human experience we're creating in our built environment.
But we'll take a moment to look at some of the people who've inspired us both in work, both in our architectural design, as in Louis Kahn in this upper zone. And we were fortunate to take the opportunity to present his Exeter Library for the 25-year award, which was awarded by the AIA. So very important to both of us. And then abroad, Fumiko Maki has been an inspiration both in his work and his approach to the work. The Spiral Building in Tokyo, and we had the opportunity to work with Mr. Maki on the Media Lab in Cambridge for MIT. So long-standing inspiration there. We also have what we call our guides. There were a few women who were quite inspirational to us in their, both in their practices, in the way they express their convictions, and in their generosity of guiding us with individual issues over time. So very dear friends. They started out as our idols and they became our friends, and we miss them very, very much. Sarah Harkness, who was a principal at TAC, as Andrea mentioned, the Architects Collaborative in Cambridge, and Joan Goody, who was a principal at Goody Clancy. Hats off, ladies.
And I would say that when we began, these were the only women we knew who actually were principals of practices. There weren't
We didn't
so many.
know about
Didn't know.
Beverly. She was far away.
She was very far away. And we didn't know many of us either. But these two women were out there, and the few who were.
And then our partners. All of this architecture work doesn't happen with just one or two people. And our partner, Josiah Stevenson, we have here, has really developed great leadership within our firm.
Just became FAIA.
Just FAIA. And we're very proud of him. He's a real leader both inside the firm and outside in practice and in his community. And then our associate principals, Natasha Espada and Tom Chung and Winnie Stops, who are active participants and leaders in our firm and with dynamic work that they are undertaking. And we're thrilled at the ability to join in our practice in a collaborative way on our projects and to share our enthusiasm and garner the enthusiasm of our colleagues in the firm. So more hats off.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's our presentation. We thank you.